What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be going over a tier list of the best classes to play for the endgame with their key passives as the focus point of this video. Some classes, they kind of start off better, and sometimes they actually get better as they progress. Like, for example, Barbarian is going to be able to have more weapons, so you're going to have more stat 6, more legendary powers at your disposal. In addition to that, this is kind of something that we haven't actually seen access in the previous betas, which is the key passive. So these unlock kind of towards the end of the game, depending on how many skill points you can actually acquire. You're going to be needing about 30 plus, so it's kind of towards the end of the game. But which ones actually scale and give you better stats? That's the whole point of this video. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. We'll also briefly make a quick little tier list of everything that I do want to talk about. So starting right off, in terms of the key passives, let's go over the Barbarians, and let's go ahead and actually rank theirs, and let's get started. There's going to be a few different tools that we'll be using in this video. I'll use Max Roll to kind of explain certain things, and in addition to that, we'll also use Wayman's data mined unique items, as it kind of applies to certain things that we can start scaling in the game towards the end of the game. So starting off with the Barbarian, I'll also try to put in the pinned comment some of the timestamps in case any of you guys just want to see kind of where the class lies that you want to play. So starting right off, the Barbarian has access to Unconstrained, which increases the Berserk's duration by maximum duration by 5 seconds and increases its damage bonus by 25%. So what does Berserk do? So starting right off, Berserk will actually make it so you're going to grant yourself a buff which gives them 25% increased damage and 30% increased movement speed. So with this bonus over here, obviously duration will just extend how long it's lasting, and then on top of that, you're going to be able to increase its damage bonus by 25%. So is that 25% of the normal stat, as in this would go up to 50% increased damage, or is it an increase of 25% of whatever is over here, which would basically just be another like 5% bonus damage? So as far as that goes, I'm guessing it's plus 25% like extra damage versus the later. But again, sometimes these things do need to be tested in game. But if it's only 5%, that's obviously not enough. Most of these give you about anywhere from like 20 to maybe even 30% increase, maybe attack speed or some sort of bonus to your character. And that's kind of the average. So this one, it does increase the duration. But remember, Berserk, to keep it up 100% uptime, it might not be super viable, especially in the earlier stages of the game. But plus 25% when you can actually have it, it's okay. Because it does have a condition that needs to be met, while there are some other classes where you can kind of upkeep these key passives a lot easier. Next up, Barbarian has Walking Arsenal. This makes it so dealing direct damage with a two-handed bludgeoning, two-handed slashing, or dual-wielded weapons grants 10% increased damage for 6 seconds. So that could be up to, potentially, 30% if you have all of them active, because it says while all 3 damage bonuses are active, you gain an additional 15% increased damage. So if each one of these has its own individual stats, I mean, we'd be looking at 30% bonus damage on top of 15%, which would be 45%. Now, it does have all these requirements. You're going to have to basically swap in between 3 different abilities that do different things, meaning that it's going to have to require you to equip the weapon that is required and use an ability that meets all these requirements, and it's for 6 seconds. It's not a very long duration, so it's going to reset pretty much when you go from pack to pack in the game. This one is okay. Next up over here, this is basically the best Barbarian one in the entire game. It's called Unbridled Rage. It says core skills deal 135% increased damage, but cost 100% more fury. Now, there are a bunch of legendaries as well as uniques in the game that you can put on in terms of aspects to actually increase your resource generation. And there are some builds, and there is some theory crafting going around right now, where if you're going to just max out in topazes, you can actually keep all of your fury and maybe expend it all in one big go, kind of like almost a bone spirit necromancer if you played Diablo 3, or even similar to any of the Skelly Mage Necros, where you pump out all your resource but you get an insane amount of damage. That could be potentially something that you may want to look into. This has insane amount of damage potential, and because it's always active, as long as you can somehow maybe be able to get as much resource generation as possible, there might not actually be a downside. And in terms of numerical stats, this is actually one of the highest in the entire game in terms of like bonus damage. Barbarian is actually pretty good. And this other one, Gushing Wounds, it's nothing to be too excited about. It makes it so when causing an enemy to bleed, you have a chance equal to your critical strike chance to increase the bleed amount by 100% of your critical strike damage bonus. So if you are playing a build that can meet, this niche requirement, and then on top of that, overpowering a bleeding enemy creates an explosion that inflicts 11% bleeding damage over 5 seconds. So I mean, it's a nice little bonus, but it is a damage over time, and a lot of times people don't really get to feel that huge power when they see that kind of dot damage. But as far as Barbarian goes, where would I actually rank this? Because the whole point of this video was essentially kind of to make a tier list. Barbarian is actually pretty solid. It's simply just because of this unbridled rage. The rest of them aren't really anything I would say super standout or worthy. Next up, though, this one is going to be standing out a lot. The Druid late game is crazy. It has one of the best keystones, or key passives. So, starting right off with the Earnsign Shrink, you gain 20% additional maximum life while in werebear form and extra after leaving. There are uniques in the game where your base form becomes a werewolf or werebear. This is actually something that was data mined, but basically there is a unique in the game that allows you to just permanently be in werebear form, so that's going to be a bonus. And then while healthy, which is I believe above 80% life in the game, you get 30% increased damage. So more health and damage. It's like, okay, it's pretty solid. Again, a lot of these stats in this game, they'll be like 20 to 30% bonus at damage or maybe some damage reduction. Sometimes they're kind of a hybrid. This one is hybrid and has like some sort of condition, but for the most part, you can upkeep the first part of the bonus. Up 100% of the time. Now with Bestial Rampage, after being in a werewolf for 2.5 seconds, you gain 20% attack speed for 15 seconds. And then after being a werebear for 2.5 seconds, you get to deal 20% increased damage for 15 seconds. So considering, again, like I mentioned before, you can actually change your base form to either werebear or werewolf. You can upkeep this. One of the stats is going to be up 100% of the time almost. The other one, you can use a couple skills and just try to upkeep it. I mean, 20% attack speed and 20% increased damage is actually going to be pretty good if you have both of them. Overall, one of the more solid ones, but again, nothing too crazy. Next up, we have Lupine Ferocity. Every 6th werewolf skill hit critically strikes and deals 60% increased damage. I mean, I don't know how far in terms of the crit hit chance you can get in Diablo 4 is going to be like at the end game. I mean, this is kind of all just speculation. But on average, in terms of like Diablo 3 and in a lot of action RPGs, you can get about 50% crit, right? That's kind of the numerical stats that we're looking at. Is that going to be that insane? I mean, 60 multi every 6th attack is kind of weak. Next up, though, Earth and Might. Okay, this is the one that I've got my eye on. So this one is actually quite insane. So with Earth and Might, it makes it so you have a lucky hit chance. Actually, can I scroll down? Because this thing actually doesn't scroll down long enough. It's fine. There we go. Now you guys can read the full text. So it says, lucky hit, damaging an enemy with Earth skills has up to a 5% chance to restore all of your spirit. That's insane. There's no thing in the entire game that gives you your entire resource bar that's just on like a random RNG 5% chance. And if you're attacking fast enough, this can be huge. Or you can make it so cause your attacks to be guaranteed critical strikes for 5 seconds. Now, I'm not sure if you can only have one of these abilities or if you have that 5% chance active on both. Guaranteed crits is insane, and on top of that, restoring all of your spirits. And then on top of that, this chance is increased by 10% for crit strikes. Now, if you get all of your attacks for 5 seconds to be guaranteed crits, then you have a 10% chance for all of this stuff to be active. And you can maybe keep it up 100% of the time. And then 10% if the target is stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. Now, does this double up? What if the target is stunned, and on top of that, you're critting them on a stun? Would that double up? I don't know. But numerically, this is insane. Druid is by far, with this one, the best in the entire game potentially. Next one up, we have something called Nature's Fury, where casting an Earth skill has a 20% chance to trigger a free Storm skill of the same category. Numerically, it's like 20% extra damage, if you want to think of it kind of like that. As long as that skill that it's triggering is also something that you have points invested into, right? And then on top of that, in addition, casting a storm skill has a 20% chance to trigger a free earth skill of the same category. So again, it could be okay. Numerically, if it rolls the right one, there's a 20% DPS increase. Then we have Perfect Storm. Storm skills that you cast grant 1 spirit and deal 15% increased damage when damaging a vulnerable, immobilized, or slow enemy. So 15% damage increase and some more generation. I mean, getting 1 spirit versus if you have enough like attack speed and enough crit, restoring, I mean, keep in mind, you could expend all of your spirit, get that 5% chance, or it could be even higher. You restore all of it, get that chance again, and you're just going to be restoring spirit like crazy. I think this one is by far the best in the game. Now, if I was to put Druid off of just what I'm seeing here, it's the best in the entire game. I gotta be honest. I was very surprised when I saw it. I was like, dude, this is crazy. It has 2 different effects, and if you have both of them active, it has synergy with itself. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Next up, the Necromancer. Necromancer is actually pretty powerful as well. Necromancer actually only has 4, so starting off with the first one, which is actually the best. The Ossified Essence. It says your bone skills deal 1% increased damage for each point of essence you have above 50 upon cast. So there's no limit to this. Now, if we looked at the character, and let's say you can get like anywhere from 10 to 30 per gear slot, you may not be able to get in every single piece of gear. It depends on how the game rolls in terms of the end game. But if you get 10, 15 here and there, maybe even like 30 on maybe a 2-hander, this could be massive. I mean, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If we just get 10 per, all right, I mean, that's a 100% increased damage to bone skills. And there is a unique here that I was going to highlight. It's called the Blood Artisan's Quiz. It makes it so Bone Spirit, a free Bone Spirit is spawned sometimes when you pick up a Blood Orb, which is not hard in terms of a condition at all for the Necromancer. You could just get a free Bone Spirit. Now, Bone Spirit is a bone skill. In fact, there are a few different skills. There's like a generator. There's also Bone Spear. There's also Bone Prison. But the thing that's actually going to be insane is Bone Spirit. The reason why is it's going to be able to deal an insane amount of damage because it's going to consume all of your essence to just power up this giant attack. Now, the reason why it's so good is this actually has no limit to how much damage you can actually deal as long as you can reach that essence requirement. Now, there was a build in Diablo 3, if any of you guys remember, where you would stand super far away and you would one-shot these Rift Guardians. Here's a video, courtesy of Rob. He's another fantastic Diablo content creator. But they were doing this thing where they would stand like many, many screens away. It was another Bone Spirit, because Bone Spirit is kind of known for doing massive, massive damage. And this is a GR 150. It's the hardest difficulty you can do in terms of a GR. And watch this Rift Guardian. It's just going to get one shot in like a second over here. Bam, instantly dead. GR 150 down. So there is huge potential. Again, everything that I'm talking about could be subject to be changed day 1, but as far as I'm aware, the game went gold a while back, so unless it's going to be game breaking like that, I don't know if this is something that could be nerfed. So keep that in mind. This thing is insane because again, it has no limit. You can just start stacking all your damage. You just get as much essence as possible and just massive amount of bone spirit damage. And again, as soon as you consume a blood orb, you can just get a free bone spirit anyway. So this could be big, man. All right, so next up, now that I went over Bone Spirit, or just any of the bone skills, it's going to be increased. But next up, we have Kalon's Edict. Makes it so after you have not taken damage for the last 3 seconds, your minions gain 15% attack speed. While you have at least 7 minions, this bonus is doubled. So 30% increase attack speed for your minions. So for minion builds, it's actually not too bad. But remember, you have to not take damage for 3 seconds. Now, if you played the Necromancer, you've probably seen the Blood Mist unique item, or is a legendary power that you can extract. But nonetheless, with the Blood Mist one, you can infinitely not take damage in the game. As long as there is just one corpse once in a while, and you're just constantly corpse exploding, yeah, this is going to be 100% uptime. So it's okay, though. It's not anything to get too excited about. It's not the Bone Spirit one-shot, do insane amounts of damage with infinite potential for the most part. We have Shadow Blight. This makes so Shadow damage infects enemies with Shadow Blight for 2 seconds. You and your minions deal 10% bonus to enemies with Shadow Blight. And every 10th time an enemy receives Shadow damage from you and your minions while they're affected by Shadow Blight, they take an additional 20% Shadow damage. Now, does this stack over and over again. If it can infinitely stack, this actually has potential for like big bosses, but it's going to be over the course of a very long time. And if you play Necromancer against some of like the world bosses, they don't always survive, right? So they may have to reset. I don't know how exactly this registers it. Is it on your character, or is it on that minion that applies that specific Shadow Blight, and will that actually reset? I don't know. So this one has a little bit of potential, but it's going to take a long time to ramp up. Next up, we have the Rothma's Vigor. So it increases your maximum life by 10% after being healthy for 15 seconds. Your next blood skill overpowers. It's okay. I mean, even if we have the ability to overpower once every 15 seconds, even if we don't even count the healthy, mediocre, right? Again, it really comes down to this one over here. So I would say Necromancer, you have huge potential to get massive one-shots. If you guys have seen, there are some Barbarian videos out there where people are one-shotting some of the like stronger elite, the bosses in the game. Yeah, so with Barbarian, and more than likely with Necromancer, you have some potential too. I know Barbarian did take a nerf where they made it so you had kind of some sort of a cap on how much like bonus damage that you can get, but with Necromancer, right now we don't have that. So that is Necromancer. Alright, so next up over here we have the Rogue, which is honestly one of the most disappointing ones, but this is a class that I plan to play, so like I've done some extensive like research into like what can we actually do to make this really good. So starting right off, momentum. So cutthroat skills are going to grant you a stack of momentum for 8 seconds. That includes basically the teleport like stab. That's going to be the one I think most people will be using. And you're going to be gaining a second momentum for 8 seconds if they either hit a stunned, dazed, or frozen enemy, or hit any enemy from behind. So you can actually proc 2 of those pretty easy. And then while at 3 stacks of momentum, you get to gain 20% increased damage reduction, 30% increased energy regeneration, and 15% increased movement speed. Now, the problem with it is you have to have 3 different stacks to actually get that benefit. Otherwise, you don't really get anything. So overall, I would say it'd be nice if it gained 1 step at a time, and on the final step to gain some sort of increased damage, because this actually gives us no damage. While it does give us damage reduction, if you're good with Rogue, I feel like a lot of times you can dodge most of the things in the game. I would say this is kind of a skip for me. Even though like it sounds really good to get all of these different stats, remember you're going to have to apply these conditions every 8 seconds, and there's 3 different stacks that you have to maintain, otherwise the whole thing drops off. So I would say this is a little bit weak. Next up, we have Close Quarters Combat. It says after damaging a close enemy with a marksman or cutthroat skill, you gain each gain 10% attack speed bonus for 8 seconds. So you get a total of 20% attack speed. And then while both attack speed bonuses are active, you deal 20% increased damage to crowd control enemies. It's really not too difficult to crowd control enemies. A lot of the generators can actually apply that. The throw daggers will actually apply a slow. So it's not too bad at all. And I think this is basically, yes, it has to build up, but you get 20% attack speed and 20% increased damage. This one actually is what I would consider like the base, like solid one for Rogue that is kind of similar to, again, 20 to 30%-ish damage in total increments. This one has another bonus, but you have to meet both of those like conditions, which is not actually that difficult to reach. Next up, we have Precision. Critical strikes with marksman skills grant us precision. You gain 4% increased critical strike damage per stack of precision up to a maximum of 20%. So 20 crit multi is not even that good. I mean, it's like just there's less than 20% bonus damage because it's crit multi versus like actual flat crit as well. But when you reach maximum precision, your next marksman skill is a guaranteed crit, and that deals 40% increased critical strike damage, then consumes all stack of precision. Even if you get the extra bonus of the 20%, with it, I mean, that's 60 crit multi on reaching a maximum crit. If you have max crit, I mean, is it really going to be that good? I'd still say that the other one is far superior, giving you extra attack speed, and on top of that, you get flat 20% increased damage to crowd control enemies, which, again, depending on the build, if you can apply it, it's numerically, it's just better. Next up, we have Victimize Lucky Hit. Dealing direct damage to a vulnerable enemy has up to a 30% chance to cause an explosion, dealing 23% of the original damage to them and surrounding enemies. So this is actually useful if you do want to use the trap ulti that can pull everything together like a Zarya grab in Overwatch. This ability, if you have a bunch of enemies stacked up on top of each other, this has some potential, being able to deal massive amount of damage, again, if the enemies are able to kind of be stacked up on top of each other. But it's a 30% chance to do 23% damage. I would still much rather just do 20% damage and have 20% more attack speed, numerically. I mean, if you really want juicy pops, you can maybe utilize this, but overall, this is probably going to be better. You could just use Shadow Imbue and have awesome pops. So that's where I feel that one lies. Now, exposure makes it so dealing direct damage to an enemy affected by a trap skill has a 25% chance to reduce the active cooldowns of a trap skills by 20%. Drop a cluster of exploding stun grenades that deal 40% of total physical damage and stun enemies for 0.5 seconds. So, you still have to apply the trap skill to get that chance to maybe get some of these. I think as long as it doesn't have an internal cooldown, being able to stun could be pretty good, but you can't really stun bosses consecutively. There's a bar that would need to build up in the first place, and being able to reduce the cooldown of traps by 20%. I'd rather just have 20% more damage with 20% attack speed. Like, this one is just by far the best. I don't really know if anyone's going to try really at the higher end to min-max with anything but this one. That's at least the one I see right here being like the only like viable option. Rogue, I gotta admit, it's probably one of the worst ones. There's nothing too crazy that you could have some crazy build around doing certain things. Yeah, that's just how I feel about Rogue. I'm curious to know how you guys honestly feel about Rogue, if you guys have read all of the key passives. Again, when you look at what Druid could get, remember, Druid could get all of the resource back. They can have guaranteed crits, like the 2-in-1, right? That is just numerically just way, way better. All right, so next up, we got the Sorceress. So what does the Sorceress have at their disposal? So this is what they've got. They've got Avalanche, which makes it so you have a lucky hit. So your Frost skills have an up to a 10% chance to make your next cast of Ice Shards, Frozen Orb, or Blizzard consume no mana and deal 40% increased damage. Chances doubled against vulnerable enemies. So the way I see this is it's your next cast, okay? So the Frost skills, which, I mean, those are Frost skills in the first place anyway. So if we go to Frost, you can see that Frozen Orb and Ice Shards. Ice Blaze has some potential for like some really crazy cooldown, but that's for a different video. We're going over key passives in terms of a tier list here. Our next one, so that's not even like on every single cast that we have like a 10% chance, right? That would theoretically, because it's every other cast, which would make it get 5%. Now it is doubled against vulnerable enemies, so we could, let's say the enemies are always vulnerable. That would still be a 10% chance, because even with the double chance, it's every other skill. So I feel like this one is very weak. Yes, you get the increased damage, and you do also maybe get to apply like the Frozen Orbs extra. Like there's one thing where it gives you some mana on Frozen Orb. Like there are some like maybe some niche things that you can get. Like when you hit a frozen enemy, you can get 5 mana back. But like, is that really that big of a deal on a 10% chance to proc if they are vulnerable? Because remember, it's every other class. And to get 40% increased damage, the numerical stats on the chance for this to activate are way too low for the just 40% increased damage. You'd have to have the increased damage multiplied times way more to make this viable. Next up, we have Shatter. After freeze expires, enemies explode for 25% of the damage you deal to them while frozen. I mean, again, think about it. If you just had like 20% more damage with 100% uptime versus freeze, are you going to be freezing bosses? No. So it's like going to be like really useless against a lot of the bosses or even some of the elites in the game, where they're not going to be able to consecutively be frozen. Or some like world bosses, like is it going to even be effective at all? Right? Because I don't believe you can. I know like some of the bosses are like the world bosses, they get like in a staggered state, and that may count as them being frozen. But if it doesn't even count as other conditions, then this does nothing. So that one's kind of bad. Next up, Overflowing Energy. We have Crackling Energy hits one additional enemy. So if you guys don't know what Crackling Energy is, it's kind of for lightning mostly, but there's other ways to get it. And you could basically have like a very small little conduit effect. It kind of shocks everyone around you, and it just deals small amount of damage. And then on top of it, there's ways where like if you pick up Crackling Energy, which it drops when certain conditions are met. And you can actually gain mana regen when you pick it up. But anyways, crackling energy hits an enemy. Your shock skill cooldowns are reduced by 0.1 seconds and are increased to 0.25 seconds against elites. Now, this could be good for any of the builds that have the little lightning thing that goes around, and if it's consecutively hitting enemies and you're getting crackling energy, and if it's going to consecutively get your cooldowns reduced, there are some builds potentially. If you can have, you know, insane cooldown reduction with this ability, maybe it has some potential if you can 100% uptime keep on popping crackling energy. And it says whenever it hits an enemy, so I'm hoping that that does work. If it hits multiple, will it reduce the cooldown by more? If it hits, let's say, 10 enemies, would that be 1 second at that point? Because it's a 0.1. That's where I feel like it may have some potential for insane cooldown reduction. Then you can activate some of your shields that give you mana cost reduction, and then if you're able to consecutively keep up these shields, and on top of that, reduce the cooldowns of your abilities, it has, again, some potential. Next up, we have Veer's Mastery. Close enemies take 10% increased damage from your shock and deal 20% less damage to you. Critical strikes increase these bonuses by 25% for 3 seconds. So if we're increasing the bonus of 10% by 25, we get, what, 12.5% increased damage? So I'd say that that is very mediocre, even like 5% less damage taken. So if we're like 12% increased damage, 25% less damage taken from you, it's mediocre. Again, it's more for like the defensive stats, I guess, really than anything, but I think people want more DPS. With Isu's Ferocity, our fire critical strike damage is increased by 25% against enemies above 50% life. Your fire critical strike chance is increased by 5% against enemies below 50% life. And then killing an enemy with a critical strike grants both these bonus against all enemies for 3 seconds. So again, for bosses, you'd only get kind of one of them, but just killing some trash. I mean, being able to have 25% increased crit multi, which, I mean, that's like, what, 25% increased damage. Again, that's only on crit multi. And if we're looking at, again, about 50% crit towards endgame of Diablo, if that's kind of the numbers that we're getting, 12% increased damage is kind of mediocre, and then 5% crit chance. Again, I would say that's a little bit lackluster. Next up, we have Combustion. Our burning effects deal 2% increased damage per unique source of burning effects that you have applied to the enemy. So if you have a bunch of different skills, you could get a decent amount of burn damage. This gets kind of interesting. It depends on what you want to build your character around, because like most builds are going to want to play teleport, but like, yeah, sure, maybe you slam every single thing has a different source of burn. Sure, you can get a good amount of burn damage. Let's say we had like 5 burn skills, okay? And then that's like 10% increased damage. And then if the enemy's burning from 3 or more sources, this bonus is doubled. So maybe 20% increase burning effect, getting that damage, like 20% increased damage. I would say Sorceress is actually pretty weak too. Overall, like, especially on like Shatter, 25% damage only when you freeze. It's not that easy to freeze, like, again, bosses and stuff. So I'd say the only one that has some potential, like, Sorceress is kind of looking toward the bottom of the barrel too. If this one isn't good, like, if you can't make some build where your, because it only applies, it says your shock skill cooldowns, and let's go over this really quick, because I think this is kind of important. So if we look at the shock skills that some people may want to use, I know Chargebolt recently got a buff and a patch, but Teleport, that's a pretty good one, right? You know, having access to rapidly spamming Teleport, and Lightning Spear, because this one can hit a consistent amount of time, and then absorbing crackling energy has a 10% chance to conjure a Lightning Spear. If we can keep on getting all these crackling energies to constantly appear, and we're constantly picking them up, getting those extra lightning spears to keep on activating and getting an extra cooldown reduction, this could have some potential. But I would say overall, this may not be something that is going to be insane. I'm going to say at least this one has some potential to do some crazy stuff with crazy cooldown reduction. But I would say there's a big separation in terms of the key endgame passives for most of the classes, and here's what I would say would be a good tier list to kind of look at for reference. So basically, Druid is by far the best. There's no question about that. Barbarian is pretty solid. Necromancer is really good, and you know, one of my favorite classes, which is the Rogue, is towards bottom of the barrel. That's at least what I would consider it to be a tier list. So let me know, guys, if you think that these should be adjusted in any way down below. But that's going to go ahead and wrap up things for the video. I'm curious to know your thoughts on any of these, and if you guys do want to see more videos, and this is free, first time here, hit subscribe, turn the bell, and check the pinned comment. There's going to be a lot more, and hopefully you guys learn something new with this because, man, there's a lot of stuff to learn in Diablo 4. But take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.